this is Mike with Montshire at Home, and today we're continuing our density week by mixing up some of our own salt solutions in an experiment I like to call liquid rainbows. For this one, you're going to need just 2 glasses of water. I have a cup of water in each, some salt, just a tablespoon will do, and some food coloring. Later on, we're also going to need a test tube and a pipette. Now, this is what I use at the museum, but you might not have exactly the same thing at home. But any skinny container will do. I found a couple examples of ones just in my son's chemistry and detective kits. Here's a empty bubble solution container. That'll work fine. Maybe even a skinny vase would work for us. And if you don't have a pipette to move liquids back and forth, a straw, or you might find a syringe with some medicines that will work just as well as our pipette. So to get started, we're going to take a tablespoon of salt and put that into one of our cups. The other one we're just going to keep as tap water. And I'm going to dissolve, I'll stir that up a little bit. And throughout the course of this, we do want to be making observations, keeping track of the things we notice, things we see happening in the experiment. And right off the bat, when I start stirring up that salt, I know it gets really cloudy. And if I hold that up, I still see a little bit of solid salt crystals on the bottom of the cup, but certainly not as many as when I first put that salt in. That salt is starting to dissolve into our water. It's still in there. We just aren't going to be able to see it as those solid crystals anymore. Now, I'm going to give that a moment to settle out, and then we'll continue on with our experiment. It's only been about a minute, but you can see our salt water now is pretty hard to distinguish from our regular tap water. That salt's in there. It's just been dissolved throughout. For the next part, we're going to add some food coloring to each. This I'm going to put the same color into each glass just to help with our observations. But if you're doing this with somebody else, and you each have your own set of salt solutions going, go ahead and use different colors. You use one color for both of yours, and have your partner use another color in theirs. So to do this, and I want the water nice and still, and I'm just going to drop the colors in and observe, watch, see how they react when I put them into the fresh water and into the salt water. Fine, sometimes you might want to get down low and look from the side or look above to really see all the different things going on. So I'm going to drop a few, 3 drops here, 1, 2, 3 into each. And now we're just going to observe, see how they behave. And that freshwater one, you might have noticed those drops moved right down and are really spreading out throughout the water. The salt water, though, not quite as much. All that blue food coloring is staying put right up towards the top. And you might have guessed, this probably has something to do with the salt that we put into the water. By taking that tablespoon of salt, we added a lot more stuff, more mass into our water. So not only is it now the cup of water, but it's the cup of water plus all that salt. And by adding that extra little bit of mass, we have then changed the density. And so our salt water is a little bit more dense than our fresh water. The food coloring is probably mostly water. So in our regular water, it starts to spread out. on there. But in our salt water, it's going to start to form a layer on top because that food coloring is a little less dense and it's being supported, held up there by our salt water. I added a couple more drops of food coloring onto my fresh and salt water. Now it's really difficult to tell them apart. If you have been doing this with a partner and you now have two different sets of fresh water and salt water, what I'm going to have you do is trade your fresh waters. Now, since I don't have a partner, I made up my own other colored fresh water. So I'm going to take out my freshwater blue and use then some yellow water here in its place. And since these have different densities, we're going to be able to do some fun experiments with them. So this is the part where I'm going to use then our test tube and pipette. Again, if you can find some skinny tube and something to transfer then the liquids, those are going to work also. I'm going to start this by getting a little bit of my blue salt water and adding that, filling my test tube up about halfway. And next I'll add in our yellow fresh water. And the key for this is doing it no matter what device you're using it, adding that fresh water as carefully and as slowly and gently as possible. And if we do, and we have it in the correct order with the densest on the bottom and the less dense on top, we're going to notice that instead of mixing together, we're going to get some layers. Now, just to check, what happens if we do this the other way? If I put in my fresh water and then real carefully add my salty water. And you can see for that, it's not staying up on top, but sinking right down into the bottom. Now, point, we do want another empty cup for this reason right here. So you can dump stuff out and try again. And I'm going to show you how you can do this also with then a straw. If I take my straw and I put it into my water and then put my finger over the top, I'm going to be able to keep that blue, that salty water in there until I lift my finger up again and it falls down into my test tube. So I can transfer over a couple layers, a couple strawfuls of my salty water, and then I'm going to add my fresh water on top. And like with the pipette, I'm going to bring this down. I'm going to try to be as gentle as possible in releasing my fresh water. And just like before, we're going to get those nice layers. We might get a little bit of mixing in between that blue and the yellow layers, but that just adds another color, a little bit more green into it. And you do want to choose some colors that have a little bit of contrast, a darker and a lighter one. It'll just make it easier to see what's going on in your experiment. So, have fun experimenting with your saltwater solutions, and we'll see you again soon with some more density experiments.